I want to welcome you to Dream Chasers Radio with me, your host, Yaya Diamond. What's up, people? How you doing? It is a great day, and I got an author on the show. You know I love authors, man. Come on, man. We would be idiots without authors. I mean, some of us are still, I'm done. I'm not going to say I'm good. I'm good. I'm going to be a good girl. But I got Roy Weaver on the show today. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
I'm fine, and thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon.
And the pleasure is all mine. The pleasure is all mine. So tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm first and foremost a grandpa.
Oh.
And before that, a long time ago, I was the kid who had a grandpa. So it's kind of my perspective. I grew up in Swamico, Wisconsin, which is near Green Bay. I was born a Yooper, though, Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Okay.
But it was too cold in the Great White North, so we moved down south to the frozen tundra. So that's where I grew up. And I was an average kid, grew up in the country, and I think it says on the cover of my book, I grew up in the woods down a dirt and gravel road with nothing more than a shotgun, a tractor, and a axe. So I'm that grandpa that grew up walking 2 miles both ways uphill in 3 feet of snow.
With no shoes on?
With no shoes on, right? I had one shoe, but I switched it back and forth when one forgot.
Oh gosh!
And So, of course, I'm a Green Bay Packer fan, and in high school, I give credit to my teachers, my English teachers, and my teachers for not really encouraging me to write, but telling me I better. And I think the first thing I wrote was the 50 times I will not throw snowballs when I was in first grade. So that's
I did that. I totally did that. Did you do the I?
Yes, I took a ruler and I drew the line straight down the page for the I's and the L's. And so in first grade, you want to argue with the principal, but he says ignorance of the law is no excuse. And that kind of stuck with me the rest of my life. But then after high school, I went to college at the University of New Hampshire, where I got a scholarship for ski jumping. So I was on the Nordic ski jumping team. And then I made the US ski team, tried out for the Olympics and failed. I fell. It's like falling off the balance beam every time you try to get up on it. So I didn't make it into the Olympics, but after the Olympics, I was able to defeat all of the Americans but one that went to the Olympics in front of my hometown fan club.
Nice.
But, I try to set an example for the kids and grandkids and encourage them to do whatever they want to do, but I would not encourage them to do
that. Yeah, that sounds kind of dangerous, though. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not a skier.
I think it was, my dad we had 4 kids, and I think he thought the best way to make it look like an accident was to have us start ski jumping. Of course, he said, I know how you can make the Olympics. And then that's when it all started. So, and then after college, I was married, had a daughter, and joined the Air Force during the previous recession. You know how they say the economy hasn't been this bad for 40 years? Well, that was it. I was there. I was in the one 40 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And so I joined the service and then did 4 years in the Air Force and then went to work for a defense contractor in Washington, D.C. Spent a lot of time learning about the government, learning about the characters in the government and some of the different perspectives. And then, of course, after that, I worked civil service for the Army for 26 years, and I did one tour in Iraq. So,
Well, thank you for your service. Definitely, thank you. Thank you.
I would like to thank everyone for their service and everyone for their support.
Definitely. It's difficult to go there. I mean, I'm sure that you've seen things that most people have not ever and will never see in their lives. So,
well, I saw heroes, and that's kind of what my book is about. The unlikely heroes that emerge from, it's not really places, but events that you would never expect. And I considered my tour in Iraq like being Forrest Gump. I kept showing up in places and ending up in places where it's like, how did I get here? And having such an opportunity to experience that, instead of just sitting in an office somewhere, I was out driving an armored truck to Baghdad.
Wow. Wow. So you said your book came out of that. So what's the name of your book and how did that come about?
Okay, my book is called The Largemouth Bass and the Way of Things. And it's sort of it's a look at unlikely heroes. And of course, it wasn't inspired. The political aspect of it, of course, was inspired by my 30 years experience with politics in Washington, D.C. and all over. But the very first movie I went to as a child was The Incredible Mr. Olympic.
Oh.
And that's the first movie I went to in a theater. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Don Knotts is one of the characters. And it's a World War II kind of movie. And Don Knotts falls into the ocean and becomes a fish because he loved fish so much. So that was sort of the landscape and perspective that I had when I decided to use the largemouth bass. And it sort of compares what happens to society and the world when animals take on the same characters and qualities and aspects of humans, sort of like when you combine the laws of nature and the laws of man. And now the laws of nature don't change, but the laws of man will change to adapt to whatever the people who want to reign in dominion want it to be. Because the book is about what happens when people try to reign in dominion and who are the heroes that rise up to challenge them.
Right.
And when my daughter was just starting high school, we moved because I was with the government and she was bullied all the time. And she would always fight back. And I mean, fight. And so whenever she would encounter bullies or her friends would be bullied, she would get in fights with them. And she kept fighting. And of course, she would get expelled from school.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, because, when people fight, they both get expelled from school. And so then she always stuck up for the underdog. And I admired that. But being a single parent at the time was such a challenge because I was always having to deal with the principals and the school board. And then, so the one girl with her sort of gang that would try to beat her up all the time, they tried to run her over on the road. So I finally got them into court. And in Virginia, you have a magistrate, you don't have a judge. And so the magistrate kind of sided with us. But then I realized that the politics of it is the girl's father was the security officer for the school, and he was friends with the principal. And I mean, I realized that there's a whole integrated, I don't know what you call it, but structure where the kids and reigning in dominion can be from the neighborhood, block, corner, high school, the town, the city, and including the government. And I realized over the last few years that there are people who want to reign in dominion over us, and there are people who want to reign in dominion over the world. And that's been going on since, Moses, or that carpenter's son that was, the year 1213. And so that's why I use the way of things is the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sort of took that approach, and how the political climate is so interrelated with the natural climate that when things occur, so as above, so below. And I thought, well, I tried to use the idea that if the planet was flooded, I mean, that's part of the book, is a long time ago when the planet was flooded, and it was just the creatures in the ocean, and did they act like human beings? And did certain ruling class, try to reign in dominion over all the hardworking fish? So then what I did was I related the fish to the way people are now. and how the political climate and the environmental climate are so interrelated.
Wow. Wow.
So,
I mean, okay, so you wrote the book. It's great. I mean, but why did you decide to publish it?
well, since my daughter died of brain cancer, I got remarried, and my wife has got 3 kids and 4 grandkids. So I sort of became a grandpa again, or a grandpa, which I wasn't before and was never going to be until my wife kind of saved me from that darkness. And so I wrote this story, and I had it on paper and printed it out, and my wife's daughter-in-law would keep reading it to the kids. And so I thought, well, for my legacy, I'll write this a book, and I'll leave this a book for the grandkids, because I really don't have anything else. And so they asked me stuff like, well, when can I have your stuff when you pass? I mean, that's the kind of questions grandkids ask you these days. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll leave you this book. So I published the book, and I wanted to make it illustrated because the grandkids are from 10 to 4. And so I thought, well, I'll put some nice little cartoons and illustrations in it, and I'll make it a story that mom and dad can read to them, and they can interact and ask questions like, what does this word mean? Who are these people? And I wanted to caricaturize it to be figures that are historical in the world, but well, I'll just go with a neutral character, and that way it can apply to other people that are in those situations or in those positions in the future.
Right.
Same people that are ruling the world and government today are not going to be the same people. So if I use the people from today, then it won't be as relevant in the
Right. Right. You're right. Why a large bass fish?
a largemouth bass, because the large, well, and I think you may be able to relate to this. When I was a kid, my report card used to say, has a tendency to talk a lot. And so I said, okay. So in class, the teachers would say, will you shut up and stuff like that. So I kind of had a big mouth. And then as I got older, even I always had a comment for whenever I saw something that didn't seem right. I would always have a smart ass comment. So I was called a big mouth and a smart ass. So I said, well, that's kind of a largemouth bass. And plus some of the heroes that have come up out of some of the working class realm now are starting to speak out more and express themselves. I mean, you see that school board meetings, you see it in government, you see it in politics, and you see it in social media for sure, that people are speaking out. So you have a lot more largemouth bass. Also, the largemouth bass is kind of a big fish when it's in a small pond. You have lake largemouth bass, you go fishing in a lake or a smaller body of water. But when the world is covered with water, then there are no more big fish in small ponds. It's the big fish in the small pond is now facing the big fish in the big pond. And so the largemouth bass who comes from that world now has to stand up to global, political, I guess, I don't know what you call it, but people who want to reign in dominion.
Yeah, I got it. What do you want people to get from this book after they read it? I mean, what is the whole purpose of this book for other people?
One is to look at the world, and I came up with this idea of spherical perspective, where you put an issue in the center of a sphere, and each degree moving outward to the surface of the sphere, each degree is a different perspective. So you can't just say there's 360 degrees of perspective, because in a sphere, it's 360 by 360 by 360. It's like 129,600 degrees of perspective inside a sphere. And the closer you are to the issue, the more emotional you are about the issue, to the point where you are the issue. And as you move farther back from the issue, the more farther away perspective you have, which makes you more rational and reasonable and logical about looking at the issue. So I want kids to read it and ask, what does this mean? Mommy, daddy, what is this word? And I want them to talk to each other. Or teacher, what is this word? And I want them to see that in nature, everything you see reflects back to you some aspect of yourself. You know, you can watch ants and go, look at those industrious little ants. You know, they're constantly building, and they never move off track. And you can put your finger on. There are people that are that driven towards their goal that they cannot be taken off path, and they constantly do that. And there are some that, you know, I think it was a Native American thing, because a lot of cultures have tokens where you have, you know, a buffalo token or an eagle token or something like that that represents you or your soul, your spirit soul. And so everything around you reflects some aspect of you back to you that you can learn from. And so, and you can't get much more diverse than the ocean. I mean, there is everything in the ocean. And so if the world is just that, you have from the tiniest creatures, amoebic little creatures like and jellyfish and stuff, to whales and all of that. So it's just to have a perspective that's not just focused from one direction or one area. So
That's
I think that's the biggest thing is look at how nature represents the things that you think you want to do, because it has a profound effect. What you do has a profound effect on nature, and nature should have a profound effect on you.
So, okay, so why the ocean though? I mean, it could have been land, right? It could have been, like you said, the ants, bugs, but
Yes.
why the ocean?
Well, kind of because there are so many animals now that you can't represent in an offensive perspective. You know, like, yeah, how dare you insult the deer, or
Yeah, I got you.
And I got fish, and then I use sharks, but I didn't want to offend sharks, so I call them Politi-Sharks. Politi-Sharks in Politi-Shark City, which is the capital where all the Politi-Sharks, come together to build their government. I says, like, hey, so sharks, so I got to call it something that's, but there is Shark Week. And I thought, well, maybe they can feature the book on Shark Week. And I think it's going to be animated by Dream Books. So that's kind of cool.
That is cool.
Yeah. And if they do animate it and it becomes, something that has kind of some longevity and maybe a series kind of a thing where kids can learn about government and politics, because and I did, on the cover you can see it's the Capitol and the Washington Monument are under the water. Like, yeah, it happened a long time ago, but maybe it could happen in the future. So you have to kind of decide from reading the book, a long time ago means that this is somebody in the future looking back a long time ago at what happened. And there's a little bit of climate change in there. The floods came and the planet was covered over again with water, and all there was left were the sharks, and then the sharks and all the creatures have to act like humans.
Wow.
So, and then maybe humanity will reemerge, gives them an opportunity to start over.
Maybe, but what kind of how would I say this? I mean, you have this book, you might have a movie or animation. So what are your future plans for this book or any other book that you may come up with?
Well, and I've thought about that. I wrote a book in the past. Growing up, of course, living in the woods, and of course I was a Boy Scout and stuff. But in Wisconsin and Upper Peninsula, Michigan, there are a lot of legends, I guess, about UFO things and spiritual things and that whole aspect.
Have you seen any
in that part of the country? I like I said, I wrote a book in the past about that experience, but it's real hard. It's hard to write a book about yourself in the third person. I want to write it about me. I wanted to create a third person and tell the story. I'm kind of more oriented towards, if there's going to be a story about you, someone else should write it instead of yourself. And I know there's a lot of autobiographies and stuff, and people do read those, but I like writing about other people more. But I had both what I consider kind of a UFO experience, and one is a Native American metaphysical experience, because there's a lot of Native American, I think there's a lot of Native American spirituality, not just in that part of the country, but everywhere it emerges when you start dealing with connecting the soul and the spirit to what's going on in your life and the world. So yeah, but I did, and then when my daughter died, I wrote a book about her, and it's a little more than my largemouth bass book, and it had her picture on the front and stuff, and I put it in a basket at her funeral, because I got my credentials to be a minister, and and the reason I did that was because I wanted someday to perform her wedding, and I ended up performing her funeral.
My condolences. I'm so
And
sorry.
I wrote the book about her, and I don't know if I'm ready to publish it yet, but when she turned 15, my fingers automatically typed half of her life was over. So that it's kind of weird, but people still contact me and ask me if they can have copies of that book, because it was pretty inspiring. So that, and the other one about my Native American metaphysical experience, which is and I had written like 300 and some pages, and I took some English classes in college, and so I let a college professor read my book. Of course, it was after I was out of college. I let him read the book, and what was really funny is the biggest criticism was, he says, why don't you just tell the story like you're telling the story, instead of trying to make it all grammatically correct and all the spelling and proper punctuation and everything. He said he said it was terrible.
Oh my gosh.
So I
And I
let
mean, you kind of strive for that though. I mean, as a writer, you're trying to be really good, dot the I's and cross the T's and,
right.
semicolon and colon. I mean, you try to do all of that. No.
Yeah. Advice to future writers: if you're going to tell a story, tell the story like you tell the story. And then I think, well, look at the way people write songs. People don't use proper grammar and
Oh, no.
punctuation in songs.
Mm-mm.
And so I thought, well, and those seem to be more popular. So it's quite possible if I do another book, and people are already asking me to write the next book for this one, because it's about the outcome. That they go, well, what's the outcome? I said, the outcome is up to you. The way of things were the way of things in the past. The way of things are the way of things right now. But the way of things of the future, it's not for you to let someone dictate to you what your future way of things are going to be. That's up to you. So.
Wow. 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 Well, I mean, this is just, to me, it's just beautiful that you've done this. My condolences for your daughter.
Well, thank you. Yeah,
It's
it
hard
was a
to,
while ago, 2009,
it's
and
hard to lose
but,
someone. I've lost my son.
oh man, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
So I know where you're coming from.
Yeah,
And I haven't written a book and I don't think I am. And if I do, it'll be way in the future from now.
right, right.
It's been a while, but it
Yeah,
hasn't been long enough.
yeah. Well, I just recently wrote a poem because her best friend had a pool tournament in Atlanta, in her remembering her, and that, of course, all of the proceeds went to St. Jude. They worked with the team from Atlanta General on her brain cancer. So she called me up and said she's having this pool tournament in Atlanta, because she was a 9-ball pool player, played in tournaments. And so I wrote a poem, and it's called She's Raising Hell in Heaven, because she was such a pistol. And I tell you, that was really good therapy, just for your own. I mean, it helped me a lot. Plus, the person I married pretty much saved me. So
I hear you. I
yeah.
hear you. Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Weaver, for being on the show. How can people find your book? How can they get in contact with you?
It's on Amazon in a bookstore, and it's at Durant's Publishing, durantspublishing.com, and look in the bookstore there. It's also, I just sent a copy to the London International Book Fair. And so,
Nice.
yeah, I don't sell the book myself. You have to purchase it through Amazon. But I appreciate the support. The proceeds, of course, are going to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital.
Awesome. Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
St. Jude definitely is a worthy cause, and definitely a place that helps their clients, their patients, and their parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to thank you so much, Mr. Weaver, for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's a wonderful opportunity, and being an old retired boomer that kind of lives in the basement is such a pleasure to socialize with other people, and I really do appreciate that.
Anytime, anytime. And I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hey, the information for Mr. Weaver's book is going to be in the description box below, and you don't want to miss out on getting The Largemouth Bass and the Way of Things. That's what we're going to have in the description box below, guys. So The Largemouth Bass and the Way of Things is going to be in the description box below, so it'll be easy for you guys to go ahead and get that and check that out for yourself. You know, all proceeds go to St. Jude's. It's the best thing to do. I mean, if you've ever wanted to donate to St. Jude's, just go ahead and get the book. Just the way that it is. Just get the book. Okay. Wow. Well, Mr. Weaver, thank you so much again for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. And thank you guys. And don't forget to dare to be different. Until next time, guys. Bye. Thank you so much for stopping by. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you'll be notified the next time that I upload. And don't forget to dare to be different. Until next time, guys.
I dare to be different. I dare to be different. I dare to be